Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I am a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for this show. My guest today is Douglas Wildermuth, the director of Clarkson University's Emergency Medical Services Program. Doug was first a guest on the show back in 2022 when he was named director. And since then, the program has seen some major expansion, which is what we're going to talk about today. Doug, welcome back to North Country Matters. I'm excited to learn about how the Emergency Medical Services Program has expanded.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody taking the time to listen in on this important information that we take a lot of pride in.
Yes. So in the fall of 2022, which was shortly after you joined the university, Clarkson's Lewis School of Health School of Health Sciences was named as the 2022 Outstanding Rural Health Program of the Year by the New York State Association of Rural Health. As you know, developing and expanding rural health service care systems is a big job, and Clarkson has been doing a wonderful job at several levels of healthcare, both in the undergraduate and the graduate level. But the EMS program that you oversee is really the entry level for so many folks who want to work at the community level providing emergency health services. One of the barriers to enough EMS personnel is the training required to become a first responder. 2 years ago, you started the Basic EMT classes. How have you been able to build on that program and expand those offerings to help fill the ongoing need of trained EMS personnel?
Thank you, Donna. And regarding that award and that question, it kind of goes hand in hand. A lot of that, the award was dedicated to the school primarily because of my predecessors. They did an excellent job setting up the foundation for me to walk right into. But that said, it was a team effort, and we're very appreciative of that award. It was not me alone. But yeah, our EMT programs are going well, and the foundation of all our programs is that EMT program. It's come a long way, and I'm sorry, can you repeat the second part of that question?
Oh, in other words, you started out with the EMT classes. So how have you expanded on that base to help fill the ongoing need?
Got it. So right after I came in, there was we do our regular semester classes in the spring and the fall. However, there was no summer class, and that's one of my specialties. So in 2022, we started our first summer program, and we had about a dozen in that one. And then last year we did it again with minimal advertising, and we had a little less than that. But this summer we're doing it the third year in a row, and we got 25 paid and registered for this next one. So on top of the regular 20 per semester students, and that's an ish, but 20 students per semester, we're pumping out a lot of EMTs right now, not only locally, which is where a majority of them are, but some of our college students also are taking the program for credits, and they're going back to their hometowns, which tend to be a lot of them rural, and they're helping their communities. So it's a great thing.
So you also offer continuing medical education coursework, and who is that designed for?
That's designed for any first responder, from CFR EMT all the way up to paramedic. Every 3 years, you're required to go ahead and recertify. In order to do so, you have to go ahead and basically satisfy certain components of the continuing medical education, or CME program, that the New York State Department of Health Bureau of EMS oversees. So what we have done to give back to the EMS communities is invited national speakers and colleagues and to virtually and or in person and or both conduct these CMEs from 90 minutes to 2 hours once a month, excluding the summer months and the month of December, because it tends to fall right around Christmas time. But the CME program is ever growing. We had our very first one, I'll never forget, was in the fall of 2022, and we had about 6 people in the room and 1 person virtual. And we didn't have a registration process or anything. And today we can have up to 200 to 250 register online. That you typically gets half of many virtually dialed in when it comes, because many people register and don't automatically go. But then we also have a good representation, anywhere from a dozen to 20 people in the classroom as well. So sharing the virtual and the in-classroom world with good speakers has been quite a success for us. So.
And that's really one of the things that came out of the COVID crisis, was that we all learned how to do these kinds of things online, when at that time it was not possible to meet in person. So continuing these hybrid programs really opens up the doors to people who might not physically be able to be present in a classroom.
Has a further reach, absolutely, Donna.
Yeah. So you had mentioned the last time we met that Clarkson was planning to start a paramedic program, and your first group of students is actually now being trained in that program. What does that training look like, and what is the time commitment for students who want to become paramedics?
It's a big commitment. Noticing the shortage, not only nationally, but within the state and our local region, specifically St. Lawrence County, we're in dire need of paramedics. So we developed a program where it takes 9 months to become certified. And I say develop because we looked across the country at different models. And because of how important it is to get them on the road sooner, we really didn't want to rely on a 12 to 18-month program, because although those are good, we needed something quicker. And in 18 months' time, we'd like to have 2 cohorts completed rather than just one. So our first class started in basically the end of November of last year, and 17 students, and they did 4.5 months of didactic. It's a lot. It's like a little over 580 hours in the classroom. So that's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday from 8:30 to 4:30, and then occasional Wednesdays. But there's benchmarks all throughout that program. So they have to go ahead and take this test in order to go ahead and move on to the next module, so on and so forth. So it's pretty rigorous, and we get to know them and they get to know each other very well. After that 4.5 months, they're basically cut loose to the field, where they're going to do some clinical time within the hospitals, as well as get on the ambulance and do some field time. And believe it or not, that's about 746 hours. So it's a lot of dedicated time. But some of the students are just excelling right through these phases. And it's amazing and encouraging to watch, because they want to get it done soon and provide that level of care. So right now, all 17 of them are still with us. They are still out in the field and doing their time. And we hope in August, we're going to have a wonderful graduation of all of them. So things are coming along well.
That's really a great model, which is to marry class time to practical in the field time, because that's really where you get to put what you've learned in the classroom into practice, but in under the fact that you've got people who are supervising you and watching you and helping you if you start to make a mistake or aren't quite sure what to do. So it's a perfect model for the kind of work that we're talking about. So you have a second class of paramedics planned for August. How much interest have you seen in the program for going forward in August in terms of people who want to do this?
So we conducted an open house about a month ago, and the applications are due, I think, the second week of June. Just check my sheet here. Yes, it's the 14th, June 14th, but we're constantly scouring right now, agencies, potential members, sitting down, having coffee with them, inviting them in for a tour of our facility. So we're really in this big recruitment method right now. We have about 4 to 5 that have already submitted in applications, but we're still looking for more. We want to try and bolster and or get the same numbers as we did last cohort, and go from there. But the interest is there. There's, I think, the biggest holdback is the experienced EMT that is not sure whether they should dedicate that amount of time, which is nearly like a full-time job, to something while balancing life. We all have family, we all have a job. You enter this kind of school for 4.5 months, in the classroom and then 4.5 months in the field, where you may have some more ability to coordinate your own schedule in the second half of the program. But the biggest takeaway is after 9 months, you can substantially raise your EMT salary to paramedic pay, fulfill a corner of the healthcare needs in our society, and make a difference. So I'm not saying there isn't a sacrifice, but it's a short one. And you can really have a profound impact on a lot of lives. So those are the hard conversations we're trying to have with a lot of potential members, EMTs, excuse me, to join our next cohort and the ones after.
Sure. So give us a little thumbnail sketch, if you would, Doug. What do people have to have in their background and their education in order to be ready to enter a program like this?
Excellent question. Believe it or not, you do not need any experience as an EMT. Things will probably come a little bit easier to you if you have been in the field for at least a year, but you don't need that experience. We can guide you on that. And there's certain elements within the first didactic portion where we can go ahead and see some of those inadequacies and help improve them if you don't have that experience. But besides being an EMT, you have to have the funding, and there's a lot of scholarships out there. I think over 75% of this class received scholarships. So, and the willingness, a support structure. You have to have a good, strong support structure at home. They have to understand the sacrifices that you'll be making during our interview process to see if they'd be a good candidate for the program. That's one of the things that we ask. What is your support structure like at home? And are they going to go ahead and be with you for the next 9 months? You know, it's not an easy task, but with that, it works out pretty well. Other than that, they have to fill out an application, go through an interview. After that, they will get a acceptance letter, and then they have to acknowledge the acceptance letter and whether they want to be part of the next cohort. But it's fairly simple.
Okay, so one of the things I think people always like to know about is that they've put their time in, they've done this program, they've gotten the support from their family, they've paid for their education. What are the job prospects for paramedics, especially here in the North Country?
Yeah, job prospects are very good. The North Country right now, St. Lawrence County specifically, suffers from a lack of paramedics. And the ones that are out there are dedicated and they're doing well, but they're doing a lot of work. COVID really illustrated that to us when we lost many of them. But that said, we did our own study as well, and we sent out a survey to ambulance agencies in the North Country beyond St. Lawrence County. And out of all the responses that we received back, there were over 25 responses back, we figured out that over the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be at least 66 paramedic jobs up here in the North Country. That's a lot. And that excludes any attrition from the ones that may have to put it down. So there is a huge job prospect. Now, personally, I know a lot of the leaders of the agencies around, and they are always looking for good paramedics. But in addition, our hospital systems, the networks, rely on taking critically ill patients and getting them to a higher definitive care facility, such as Syracuse area, Vermont, something that maybe our area can't service as well. Getting those patients out is a huge problem right now. We need to go ahead and get more paramedics for these critical transports and get them to these facilities. Lives do matter at this perspective, and we need the paramedics to help us.
That's a really good point. And we've all had family members who had to go somewhere else for care simply because the level of care they needed was not available locally. And one of the things that we've seen is that with hospital reorganizations and consolidations, sometimes there's just no way you can get the help you need without going somewhere else. And that transport piece is critical. So that's a really good point that you've made. You'd mentioned a few minutes ago that there is scholarship help for people going into these programs. Clarkson has some scholarships, and I imagine there's some community-based scholarships as well. Tell us a little bit about how that process works for somebody who's thinking about this and may need some financial assistance.
Yeah, absolutely. If they go to our website, the Clarkson paramedic page, they can actually, there's a big scholarship box on there, and there's several types. We have there's a through a wonderful relationship with the St. Lawrence Network. We have what's called a Clarkson Grant Scholarship, where people can apply to go ahead and get potential funding for themselves through that program. St. Lawrence County has Bureau of Emergency Medical Services and all services, I should say, has done a wonderful job encouraging education, not only at the EMT level, but also at the paramedic level. And they are constantly funding students in both aspects to help them and help get more EMS members out on the streets. So kudos to them. AHEC, our local AHEC, also has a scholarship opportunity. And then there's on a more national level, there's a global medical response scholarship available. So you can see there's a lot of scholarships to pick from, and some of them are timely during the season of the year that you can apply for them. So hopefully that will fall in. But there's also other exciting news coming down the pipe as well. We're looking at, with our partners, certain scholarships where you can actually get paid to learn. So that entire piece of sacrificing and relying on your support structure for 9 months to better yourselves and your family. Could you imagine if we added this next element where you can get paid to learn? Oh, that would be huge. And it's well needed up here in the North Country, but time will tell. It's still early on that.
So it sounds like somebody who really wants to do this work, finances is not going to be an insurmountable barrier. And that's really important when you are talking about going into this kind of work, because you need to have a knowledge base that you're not going to get unless you go to these kind of programs. So you're going to have to put your time in. And as you say, the pay to learn program, if that gets off, will be huge, because it will really open the doors for a lot of people who feel like right now they just can't figure out how to make ends meet.
Yes, no, that's for sure.
So I read stories in the news all the time about both the lack of volunteers and the aging out of the volunteers in rural fire and rescue departments here in the North Country and all across New York State. The lack of trained volunteers hampers the ability of those departments to meet the needs in their community. According to an article last year in the Watertown Daily Times, New York State wants local squads to answer at least 85% of their calls. And if they don't, they may be forced to consolidate with other squads. And we know that merging squads will result in even longer wait times because of the additional transportation issues that we have here in the North Country, where communities are far apart. So in some larger communities, there are actually hybrid systems in place with a few paid fire and EMS positions who work in concert with a cadre of volunteers. But for many small communities, finding the money to support paid positions can be a big hurdle. So what do you see as the barriers going forward to getting more volunteers trained, ready to fill these slots and make it worth their while, so that they can actually afford to do this work and yet not make sure their family sacrifice in a financial sense?
Yeah, and it's not only a financial sense, but it's also time commitment. There's a lot of volunteers right now that are older, and I know it's a passion of theirs and they're doing a great job, but they're not with their families. They're constantly going out. So I think time as well as money is going to be a problem there. You're asking a multifaceted question. So some will be my opinion, and some may be the truth. But that said, New York State is looking at more accountability and ensuring that the ambulance gets off the floor. We have never been in a situation like we are right now. When somebody should call 911, they expect an ambulance and they expect the highest level of care on the ambulance. And it's scary to think that the public has no idea who's going to show up at their door and how long when they call 911 today. That's kind of scary. That said, I think the hybrid models are working pretty well right now. We cannot expect volunteerism to get back to what it once was. And nationally, we're seeing the lowest levels of volunteerism that we've ever seen. So to think that there's going to be a pill or a golden nugget to fix this, that'll take centuries. I think facing the facts is something that the leadership of some of these agencies needs to do. They take a lot of pride in their agencies, and rightfully so. They've worked very hard for multiple centuries. So to go ahead and take that agency and relinquish it, to take that agency and merge it with another one, could make them feel very insecure. And the reaction to that is, we're fine right here. We're good in our next little sandbox. Please leave us alone. And unfortunately, that's not the way that we should look at it. There's a constant saying in EMS that patients come first. I get that. I'm not denying it. But if you can't get to the patient, that's a problem. So we need to run our ambulance departments, our agencies, as a business to get the ambulance to that patient to make patient care. So we have to stop with the patients come first, and we have to start looking at the business models of these ambulance agencies. That's going to require experience from maybe volunteers that they have within the agency, or volunteer or paid experience of members in their agency to help the leadership make these decisions to better the agency. In addition to that, EMS leaders have no requirement to take leadership programs, management classes. So here you could have a $250,000 agency that goes on 200 calls a year, has no requirements to, or no experience at managing the money and or encouraging their people to educate themselves, to recertify someone and so forth. So it's very hard for them to go ahead and say, we're fixing this tomorrow. It's going to take years to go ahead and try and fix, but it is a hurdle. So I think promoting more leadership programs, and that's something that most agencies and or educational institutions can do, would probably help this, including some sort of fiscal leadership program where they can manage expense and income and analyze that a little bit closer. We also need partnerships with our townships and or residents. I told you earlier that many of them have no idea who's going to come and when they're going to come when they call 911. So do you think they know how their ambulance department or fire department is funded? They probably don't. So the agency leaders need to reach out to the community leaders, and they need to have a cup of coffee. They need to go ahead and start sharing information and try and understand each other's budgets and how they operate, so they can have a more dynamic relationship to help fund and operate that ambulance for longer periods of time, looking at 1, 3, and 5-year plans for that agency. And that community would expect this much money going along. Is the town aware of that? Is there a tax district for the ambulance? Should one be set up to help fund that for the future? Minimal cost for the residents every year, but many areas don't have that. Typically, townships will give large sums of money to the ambulance company, and then the next year, the ambulance company say, can we have more? Well, you can't keep doing that. The well will dry up. So you can sense from my passion with this that there's a lot of business and leadership concerns that need to kind of be figured out in order to make the volunteer agencies do better to attract those volunteers. And I think with the funding, a paid element in there during the busiest times of the ambulance agency, day, week, hour, what have you, will help balance that for 1, 3, or 5 years to come. And then they can reanalyze and reassure the public at the same time that the ambulance will be there with the highest level of care with time.
Thank you. Those are really important points. And, you know, it struck me while you were talking that the Small Business Administration, which has an office over at SUNY Canton, would be perfect to work with some of these smaller town agencies who maybe don't have the kind of fiscal and budgeting experience that you've just mentioned, because they can help them put together the training and also some of the packaging that they need in order to understand what the flow of money is, because there's no question. And, as we all know, if you go to replace a piece of motorized equipment these days that's
Oh,
specialized, you're talking way, way more money than most people have ever even considered how expensive it is to replace a piece of equipment like that. So that's
oh,
great. So,
absolutely.
yeah. So, Doug, tell us about what the long-term plans for your program are. Where do you see is your next area of expansion?
So we have a lot of exciting things here going on. As you may or the public may or may not know, we have regular American Heart Association CPR courses being conducted. We have more advanced level courses, ACLS and PALS, for EMS providers that are still being taught through our department. On top of that, we have the CME program, which we discussed, so that regularly goes off. And then we have our EMT programs. Those will continuously go spring semester, summer, and then fall. And the structure of those have been more fluid and more organized. So it's great to have 30 people apply and restrict it to 25 students. But eventually we're going to have to look at classrooms that are bigger to train more people. So the EMT programs are going well, and they actually feed the paramedic program. Right now, we're starting that second cohort. We plan on doing cohorts every year, if not faster, to go ahead and ensure that we can get more ALS out there. But another kind of piece that we want to look at is the AEMT program. The AEMT program falls below paramedic and is above EMT, and AEMTs can do some advanced skills. That class is obviously a lot smaller and shorter than a paramedic program. So that might be a good happy medium after we pushed out enough paramedics to not only attract our EMTs to level up a little bit, but then also to entice them to come to paramedic instead of a bigger jump, if you will. So, and then lastly, looking at those paramedic transports that I was referring to earlier in the program, some of those are highly specialized. So critical care transport education for paramedics. We're talking a patient that might be on a vent and an ECMO pump and IV drips. I mean, that can get very technical. So once we have enough experienced paramedics out there, we want to start bringing the resources in to train to that next high level care. And although it's not a certification, oh, it is a certification. Let me rephrase that. Although it's not another licensure within New York State, it is something that you can aspire to. How can we do that? Well, I think a lot of the facilities, funding, and partnerships have been very successful here at Clarkson. And most recently, we received another grant to build a simulation lab within this building for paramedics. So we hope in the next year that will be fully constructed and we'll be able to go ahead and reach those higher precipices that I was just discussing.
Wow, that is really exciting opportunities then that are coming down the pike for sure. So as we wrap up, Doug, take a minute to talk to that potential EMS and paramedic candidate out there. What do you want them to be thinking about as they consider the needs of their communities and how they can acquire the skills and the training they need to continue to make, as you say, a real difference in the lives of their friends and neighbors?
Yeah, I think any EMT, experienced or inexperienced right now, has the inner desire, the intrinsic value to help people. We not only want to keep that flame going, but we want to make it bigger and brighter. Our paramedic programs are intense. I'm not denying that. But if you come in and sit down with us, we can tell you exactly what you need to do to make it work. We found out that it's not necessarily the grades that will keep you from going ahead and moving on in the program, as it is the time commitment. Again, not that there's certain areas that won't be challenging, but if you can get the right support system, you can go ahead and get the funding, and you still want to have that intrinsic desire to help others, we can make this work for you. It's just going to require a sit down, not necessarily a one promotion here and one promotion there, as it is assistance of your agency, getting out and talking to these potential students and interacting with more agencies to go ahead and show people that with the Clarkson program, we can fix the CMS problem.
Well, thank you, Doug, and I hope that this program helps to also kind of explain some of the parameters of all of that, so that you'll get some more interest as going forward. And I know there's already a lot of interest, and rightly so, because although there may be fewer volunteers than ever, there are still people who always want to make a difference, and this is a great way to do that in the community. So thank you so much for coming in today. From the sounds of things, the next time you level up, we'll have another conversation. So I appreciate your time today. So these
Thank you, Donna.
conversations, oh, you're welcome. These conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters.